On this episode of WarDocs Podcast, we are honored to speak with the Army Deputy Surgeon General, Major General Anthony McQueen. General McQueen shares his extensive career in Army medicine, discussing his early influences, deployment experiences, and leadership roles. He emphasizes the importance of strong leadership, the future of Army medicine, and technology integration into medical practices. General McQueen also reflects on his transition to the role of Deputy Surgeon General and the ongoing challenges and opportunities within military medicine. He imparts insights on leadership principles and provides sage advice for the next generation of military medical professionals. For further information about Major General McQueen and our previous guests, visit our website at WarDocsPodcast.com. Be sure to follow WarDocs on your preferred podcast platform and subscribe to our WarDocs YouTube channel. I'm your host, Dr. Doug Soderdahl, retired Army urologist, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Major Lindsay Unloff, active duty physical therapist.
Welcome to WarDocs, the military medicine podcast. This show brings you a first-hand, behind-the-scenes look into the mission, unique opportunities, and deployed experiences of the entire military healthcare team. From state-of-the-art hospitals in the United States to the most austere environments across the globe, WarDocs has you covered.
Today we're privileged to welcome Army Deputy Surgeon General Major General Anthony McQueen to WarDocs. Sir, thanks for joining us today.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate the invite.
You've had an amazing career over the past 33 years that have spanned MTO and TDA positions across the globe. Before we dive into your career, as a physical therapist, I'm drawn to your undergraduate degree from Fort Sam Houston State University, where you graduated with a degree in kinesiology. Can you give me some background on that and how the Army missed recruiting you as a physical therapist?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that. As we talked about before we started recording, strong ties to college sports and really always loved sports, and thought, if I couldn't play, maybe something related to treating folks with sports injuries would be useful. And so when I was at Sam Houston State, I thought about the path of being a physical therapist, and they had a program where you could go and work at the local hospital. I shouldn't say work, but assist at the local hospital. And so I went there and assisted in the physical therapy department. That probably was not the wisest decision, because what it opened me up to was treating folks that were what my age is probably now, and they were all getting knee replacements. And I was like, wow, this is not really what I thought I was going to sign up for. But anyway, I still thought about the physical therapy, and it was probably one of the reasons why I pursued being a medical service corps officer. I thought, I could join the Army, and as I join, I'll continue to look and see what's the options are for being a physical therapist. And quite frankly, I got to my first assignment in Hawaii, serving in the 25th Infantry Division, and as a medical platoon leader, just really fell in love with serving with soldiers and what we were doing, and never looked back and kept going. So the Army got me, but they just didn't get me as a PT.
So you were ROTC, and so you graduated, Distinguished Military Graduate at Sam Houston State. How did you get interested in the Medical Service Corps? Was it from that kinesiology degree, or just kind of desire to be around the medical system within the military?
I think it was partially the desire and kind of dream of maybe being a physical therapist or something in the sports medicine realm. But also, quite frankly, I really looked at branches that, at least at the time, I thought, because when I joined ROTC, I wasn't thinking of the Army as being a profession I was going to do for 30 plus years. So I was really looking at, what are the branches that I could maybe achieve a skill set that when I left the Army, that I could, do something in the civilian. So I looked at things like medical. I think my top three were medical and then other sustainment type branches. And I think signal was in the top as well. And I can remember my ROTC instructor, really getting on to me like, why don't you have infantry as number one? And I was like, well, I have my reasons. But that was really the whole thought behind the path I went.
So in the 1990s, you attended the Combined Logistics Officer Advanced course, as well as the Medical Logistics Management course. Is that typical for an AMED MedLog officer to attend both? And how did this impact your perspective on sustainment?
So certainly if you go to, back then we called it CLOAC, and I think now we call it CLIC 3. And it was not unusual to pick up the 70 kilo, the medical logistics course as well. Although there while they're related, they're different. And there was not a lot of us, and even today, there's not a lot of us that have taken that path of doing Army logistics. Many times I'll tell people, or they'll look at my bio and see the sustainment piece, and they'll think that I have done nothing but medical logistics. And I'm like, well, not really. I actually haven't done a lot in medical logistics. Most of my time has been spent doing Army logistics, looking at things like, how we feed and fuel and munitions and those types of things. And I do see medical, I'm always advocating that we integrate better since we are part of sustainment, although sometimes we kind of separate ourselves from that. And the path to getting there really was, again, I was still a lieutenant at the time, serving the 25th. I'd been there for 3 years and was told that, it's time to go to your advanced course. Really didn't know any better other than talking to, at that time we had what you call a division medical operations center. And so I went and talked to the major that was there, and he said, yeah, you should go to the advanced course. And he goes, oh, by the way, we have this new advanced course that you all are eligible for. And I was like, oh, really? And so he explained CLOAC. I think I was like the second class for CLOAC when they had just started. And I said, well, what's the difference? And he said, well, if you want to go to the AMED advanced course, you can go there and you can continue wearing Class Bs, which is what, we called the uniform back then, the greens. And he goes, if you want to go to the CLOAC, you can continue wearing BDUs or the battle dress uniform. And I was like, oh, sign me up for CLOAC. But it was really a great decision. And I look back on CLOAC today, and it was probably one of the best courses that I've attended in the Army, even as a captain, or actually I went through it as a lieutenant. And it was right at that time where even sustainment had been really functional. So if you were a quartermaster, you did nothing but quartermaster. If you were ordnance, you did nothing but ordnance. And that was at the time when we were starting to merge it and bring it in and make it all multifunctional. So all of us were there together.
So you had a chance to put that training into a real world scenario in deployments in Iraq, and you deployed a couple times, once as 62nd Medical Brigade as the Chief of Operations, and then as an XO in a Brigade Support Battalion with the 1st Cav Division. How did those experiences differ from each other? And what was something that was very memorable to you from either of those deployments?
Oh, wow. Well, first and foremost, the periods of time that they happened, from my experience, we were such in a different place in OIF and OAF. And what I mean by that is when I deployed with the 62nd, that was the early days of going into Iraq. And so just the conditions alone were, I don't know how else to say it other than, it was just really the Wild Wild West of approach going through. And as we took on our equipment in Kuwait and moved up through Iraq all the way up to Mosul, it was just much different. There wasn't these, living quarters like we had when I went back with the 115th in the 06, 08 type time frame. And so just the conditions alone were different, just a different mission for both units that I was with. With the 62nd, it was certainly exciting because at one point we thought we were going to be with the 4th Infantry Division. And if you remember back, there was the discussions of coming a northern type option. And actually I had just left the 4th Infantry Division and went to the 62nd. So I had strong ties with them. And in fact, I was being sent back to work with them on what the plans would be. And I actually deployed into Kuwait with the ADVON of the 4th Infantry Division. And then as soon as we hit the ground, we knew that everything had changed. And we were told, you're now going to support the 101st. So move as quickly as you can up to Mosul. And so our brigade headquarters, our medical brigade headquarters, and a small element of, I think at the time, the 21st Cache out of then Fort Hood, we moved up really with nothing than just, the medical personnel itself from Kuwait all the way up to Mosul. So it was a very lengthy convoy up. And we came into Mosul right behind 2nd Brigade, 101st, as they moved into the airfield up there. And so we established at least some hospitalization and evacuation capabilities early on, probably in the most northern part of the operation. And we ended up only being there for about 5 or 6 months. I think as we quickly realized this was not going to be a operation that happened very quickly, and we were going to move in and execute the operation, that we were going to maybe be there longer. And so the 62nd ended up redeploying after about 5 or 6 months. And then with the 115th, completely different mission set, supporting a brigade combat team with logistics. And it was a different period of time. We were located out of Taji, and we were executing more support. And then if you recall, that was at the time where once we hit the ground, we got extended into the 15 months of being on the ground. And also we were kind of changing our tactics of how we were going to operate there in Iraq as well.
So mixed in there during that time frame, you had a couple years where you were the small group leader at AMED Basic Officer Leadership Course. About 10 years after that, you came back to the schoolhouse serving as the chief of training at the AMED Center and School, which is now the Medical Center of Excellence. How did it feel coming back and leading those officers who are now in the position that you held? And what changes did you notice in the training over those 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I look back at the opportunity to be a small group instructor for the advanced course, really a great opportunity that someone provided to me. I was the most junior. All the other instructors were all majors, and for some reason, someone gave me an opportunity as a mid-grade captain to teach, and we had a great director that was overall in charge of the course, and I thought I learned as much from the small group, I think, as hopefully I was offering to them, with my experience, at least up to that time, as a mid-grade captain who at least had company command. And those are the things we really focused in on, was, things that you would need to know as a young company grade officer. And we focused a lot on things like the military decision-making process and those type of things. And I also look back on the director gave us opportunity. He said, hey, you have this amount of time. You have to make sure you cover all of this. I'm not going to sit and tell you how to do it, but at the end, you will have to cover that. So it gave me a real opportunity to how do I want to manage this small group of folks, usually 12 to 16 students, and ensure when we get to the end, this has been a fulfilling experience for them, and they walk away with it with more knowledge than when they arrived. I think when I returned later, certain times and conditions were different. And when I was, the instructor then, we were not at war, and certainly not at the height of war. And I think it was a different mindset of what we were trying to accomplish. And we were moving folks through much faster and those type of things. So I think just the difference in time periods, what we were going through as a nation and as an army.
So you've had the opportunity to command at multiple different levels, from the battalion to brigade, CONUS. You also are a commander at Blanchfield, at Fort Campbell, so hospital commander. What are some of the differences between MTO, TDA commands, and what lessons have you learned that you want to share with our audience about preparing for and succeeding in command?
I mean, again, I've been given a lot of opportunities. I'm not certain everyone has the same philosophy I have. I think especially as you get further into command opportunities at the 05, 06 level, that it's not as important of what type of command it is. And we don't really need that commander so much to be the technical expert. They'll have those folks within their organization. I think it's really about ensuring we've got strong leadership within those command organizations. So, I've had the opportunity, like you said, between MTO organizations. I'd like to think that someone must have been looking out for me, because when I was selected to command Blanchfield, the first thought I had in my head was, well, the closest thing I've operated in, to a hospital would be as a young medical platoon leader running a battalion aid station. But it was a fantastic experience, and you have to realize that you've got great people as part of your organization, and know what your role is of really making sure that they're a resource, whether it's with people and managing a budget and giving them that direction and guidance and training to do the mission that you ask for them to do, and really leading them more so than being the technical expert that's trying to go out into a clinic and think that you can direct them on how to do what they're being asked to do. And, same thing with given the opportunity to command the medical research and development command, when I was given that opportunity, I mean, the first thought I had was, I have no research or science background. But again, I think it really boils down to good leadership that you're putting in those types of organizations.
So what was the most difficult part of for you when you went from that primarily operational commands to now coming into a hospital, place that you really hadn't been for the majority of your career, and now you're herding cats with doctors who want to do their own thing. How did you personally prepare for that?
Well, I think just the experience that I'd had is more so that is what prepared me, because quite frankly, I went from commanding the Army Field Support Brigade in Hawaii, which was my first O6 command, and I had like 7 days, and I took command of Blanchfield. So from a prepare standpoint, but I think it's going into an organization, taking that time period to assess the organization. I'm a big believer that most of the organizations that we go to, they're already established. They're doing good things. We shouldn't have the mindset of trying to come in and changing everything. If it's working and effective, continue to sustain that. And how do you continue to make it better? And then focus in on those areas that you can identify where the organization is having a struggle at, and put your emphasis on those things, and how do you improve them. And so I think with going into commanding a treatment facility like Blanchfield, first and foremost, I think there was things that I brought from my experiences from the operational side that I was able to apply. But I also think one of the traits that I feel like I have, I'm going to listen to people. And so I think that's part of that assessment piece when you go into an organization, and listening to folks, what's going on. And you've got to establish, I'm going to have your trust until, otherwise you show that I can't trust you. Because organizations that size, you can't micromanage them. So you've got to build those relationships and establish trust throughout them going forward. But I saw little things. I'll give you a couple of examples where I'm a big believer in there are opportunities within our hospital settings where, whether you're a physician or whether you're a nurse corps officer, there are opportunities for leader development. And I really tried to emphasize those. And I remember early on when I got there was some type of meeting, and what I would find is most time it was I'd be surrounded at the table around with non-commissioned officers. And I asked my sergeant major, I was like, what's going on? This is supposed to be a meeting with all of the different departments and clinics, and we continue just to get the NCOs. And so, but what was happening, many of the officers were wanting to, and really probably needing to see patients, and they were just putting it all on the NCO. And one of the things I said was that you are a team, and this is a leader development opportunity for you you may not be a command team, but you're a team of this clinic, you're a team of this department. And I expect you both to have responsibilities for the people in your clinic or your department, how they resourced, how they trained, and how they're taken care of. And we really tried to emphasize that as a leadership opportunity for folks, whether it was called a command or whether it was called being a department chief going forward.
So from 2021 to 2023, you commanded the U.S. Medical Research and Development Command in Fort Detrick. For our audience who may not be familiar with the scope and impact of MRDC, can you give us a rundown of the command and some lines of research that were active?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times folks would reach out to me and, we thought you were just one big lab at Fort Detrick. And it's really unfortunate that more, especially senior leaders, don't know of the capabilities of MRDC because it's a tremendous capability. It's a treasure, not only for the Army, but really for the Department of Defense, and quite frankly, for the nation, because there's much of the research and discoveries that have been made are not only being used within the Department of Defense, but worldwide. And so first and foremost, it is more than just the labs there at Fort Detrick, it's actually a total of 9 organizations that make up the command, and they're spread across the United States and overseas as well. And each lab covers such a unique, focus from a research standpoint. You've got down at Fort Novasil, you've got the U.S. Army Aeromedical Research Laboratory, which really focuses on everything aviation related, with a lot of focus on rotary wing. And they've got strong ties and connections to the aviation community. They're in the center of excellence for aviation. And anytime there's any type of aviation incident, they're a part of that team that goes out so that they can learn from that as they look at research on how to anything from making helmets better to just the cockpit of an aircraft safer for our pilots and crews. They've also had a big hand in the development of FLRAA, the new aviation capability that we're looking at. And then you've got the Institute of Surgical Research, which is there at the Joint Base San Antonio, and also has our burn unit there. And so many folks automatically connect them to BAMC, which there are connections there, but that is a MRDC command that's there, and they lead a lot of our research going forward into how are we the future on wound treatment and bandages, and trying to get to a better blood product in the future. And so they're really looking in that space of combat injuries, and of course with the research that they do with the burn patients. You've got the Medical Research of Institute of Chemical Defense that's there in Aberdeen, and they're looking at all things chem bio countermeasures that we require. You got the Medical Research Institute of Infectious Disease, which is the one that most folks hear about being RID, and the one that's made some of the movies and other things, and is one of the bigger labs at Fort Detrick. And they've been instrumental in everything from the response to COVID to the response to Mpox, you name it. If it's some type of infectious disease, they've got research that's ongoing with that type of disease and developing a countermeasure for it. You've got the Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, USAREUM, which is up at Natick near Boston. This is another one that's, really small capability, but they are looking at everything really soldier related. They had a big role in doing all the data collection that assisted Army senior leaders to make changes to the Army body composition changes that recently came out. So anything from nutrition to anything we're putting on a soldier, from weight bearing, they're looking at the impacts and effects that it has on a soldier. And then they also have a laboratory on top of Pikes Peak that does high altitude research as well, and how that affects and getting the opportunity to cut the ribbon on the new lab. I can tell you firsthand, I realized just how important the research they're doing as I went to Pikes Peak and had to take a break after just a few steps. And I was like, wow, if I was to jump into some type of scenario like this, I'd be non-mission capable. And so you just realized how critical the research that they're doing for something like that. You've got the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research there in Silver Springs, Maryland. And they do so much. In fact, I used to joke that every time I would meet with them, I discovered something else that they were working on. But they certainly are one of the leaders also in infectious diseases. But probably the most important thing I would highlight with RARE that most folks don't connect is that the overseas labs are subordinates of theirs. And so the lab in Tbilisi, Georgia, the labs throughout Africa, and then the lab that we've got in Thailand all fall under RARE. And those labs overseas are critical as well. The work that they do in those spaces and those COCOMs where we've got soldiers operating at, and so they can know firsthand on what the potential threats are to them, as well as the global health type connections that they have with people in those areas is critical as well. You've got the medical material development activity, USAMDA, that helps get much of the material into the hands of our service members. And then another one that most folks don't hear about is the medical research acquisition activity. So MRDC has its own contracting capability to execute most of the acquisitions that are done. And then they've got the Telemedicine and Advanced Technology Research Center, TATRIC, which is one of the newer commands. I mean, it's been around for a while, but it just converted over to a command within the last few years. They've really advanced from their start and their name that starts with telemedicine. And I would say that most folks don't realize they're probably one of our leaders in where we're going from an AI standpoint and how we're looking at data to improve modernization on the battlefield. And then the last one I'd mention that that doesn't get enough attention is you also have the CDMRP, the Congressional Directed Medical Research Program, and it's a team of folks there at MRDC that manage funding that Congress provides and executes research that not only does it benefit the nation, but I personally got to see firsthand how the research being performed has a effect on our soldiers, our families, and even our veterans out there. So really remarkable organization overall, and really they touch on a lot in that research space that unfortunately not enough senior leaders probably realize.
So while you were there was just a few minor things going on, like Operation Warp Speed, COVID, DHA, Defense Health Agency transition, command and control. I'm joking, that's minor stuff. Major organizational change challenges. How did you react to those, and what are some of the key things that you think that ensured your team's success?
Well, it's similar to some of the things I've said already, and not to simplify it, but I do think it really starts with how you come in and assess and continue to build upon having a strong team. I think it's key on how you create environment with strong communication. I'm a big believer in team, and I've got a saying of there's the 3 T's to this effort to get to a team, and the other 2 being transparency and trust. And so, what are you doing to work towards those things? And because ultimately, you don't have a team without the transparency and trust, and you don't have trust without the transparency piece of it. And so they're all kind of interlinked and work together. And so I think those are the foundation that you've got to set in your organization. The DHA transition was a big one that we took on and continue today to work through it. I thought the critical things as we worked through that effort was, one, MRDC was an organization that had undergone and was continuing to undergo. They were just in a constant state of transition. They had been the medical research and medical command when they had all the logistics capabilities, and we moved all the medical logistics pieces out underneath Army Material Command. So they'd been under MedCom, then we'd put them under Army Material Command, and then when I got there, they were under Army Futures Command, which I thought was the right command. And then now we were going to place them under DHA. So all this in about a 10-year time period. So it certainly wears on an organization, especially when you don't know what's in the future for it. So I think communication was so critical to continue to let them know where we were in the transition and what was going on. And I think the other part was there was not this big overarching transition effort. And so we took it upon ourselves to build our own team within MRDC and established really like focus points for the transition. And I can't recall all of them off, but one would have been, the people part of it. One of it would have been the budget piece of it. And there were 6 to 8 different focus areas. And then we put folks that were within the organization as lead for these focal areas. And I thought that was critical because we could have, and we saw some of this on the side of DHA, and this isn't a ding, but, the folks that we were engaging with on part of the some of them were from a contractor company that was doing the transition planning. And I bring it up because I think by us having folks within our organization lead the effort, which, it was added work for them on top of what they were doing already. It gave a sense of ownership of the organization on I own this transition and how successful or not successful it's going to be. And so I think putting that team together and putting together kind of a battle rhythm of how they were going to meet and provide updates on the transition really assisted us in leading our way through the transition versus being led through it and told what to do. We had the ability to influence and do things. In fact, based on the work of that team, I was able to go to the director of MRDC at the time, General Place, and talk to him about, when, what were the triggers and when we should do things that I thought were in the best interests of MRDC and would not impact what I saw as the most important part of the people, wanting to make sure we took care of them.
I think that was a really great tactic to make sure that that change management, that transformational change occurred below the level of someone coming in and telling them, what to do, that they truly have ownership. And obviously that served you very well, because after your command of MRDC just over a year ago in September of 23, you were appointed to the U.S. Army Deputy Surgeon General role. What are some key duties and responsibilities of your role as the DSG, and what are some current strategic issues that you and your team are navigating?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, and the Surgeon General and I talk about this quite often, is that we're still kind of in a state of transition ourselves. And what I mean by that is we've gone from a organization where we were really much larger on the MedCom side of the house. And what I mean by that is, at one point, MedCom had the Medical Center of Excellence, MedCOE, and at that time, AMED Center School. So there's many of the capabilities that we've pushed out to organizations like TRADOC and Army Futures Command. And I think that it's the right thing to do. But we're much smaller as a MedCom now than we used to be. And we don't have nearly the size of a DHP budget that we used to have. And so with that, we're in the process of reshaping our function and structure of the organization, of the staff, because it was built for that larger MedCom. And as I tell the TSG, I said, 5-10 years ago, the Surgeon General was probably 80% focused on MedCom and executing that mission set, and 20 to 30 on the Surgeon General. And now we've done a switch where, it's 80% Surgeon General, and your role as an integrator. And what I mean by integrator is, how is she integrating with TRADOC, FORSCOM, Army Futures Command, to ensure that Army medicine is in the best position to go and do our mission set. That's taking some time to make sure we do that integration piece. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we are in the right forums and meetings within the Pentagon and on the Army staff. And so first and foremost is, if the Surgeon General is not there, I'm there representing the Surgeon General, not so much MedCom, but the Surgeon General is our staff and an integrator role. From a strategic standpoint, certainly first and foremost, number one priority is in that integrator role is ensuring that, we're staffed appropriately across the Army, not just what's in the treatment facilities and medicines, but the entire force, and, to include Compo 2 and Compo 3 as well. And are we resourced and equipped appropriately to go and do the mission that's required of us? And then certainly third is the training aspect of it. Are we training appropriately to ensure that we can go and do the operational mission? And then, so off of that, from a staffing standpoint, one of the areas that we are really focused in is not only recruiting, but retention. I think we've got a lot of work to do on the retention side. We've got some critical AOCs and skill sets that we are short, and we've got to do a better job of bringing in folks and retaining folks. And there's different levers that we're working on to improve upon that, whether it's special pay, and certainly another one that is just communicating, and how do we manage op tempo and those types of things. From an equipping standpoint, the equipping piece really focuses in on our modernization efforts, and how are we modernizing equipment and ensuring we've got the best sets, kits, and outfits, and equipping whether it's at role 1 or role 2 or role 3, to execute the mission that we're going to ask of our young soldiers and folks to do. And then the training, making sure we're keeping up with the changes that we're looking at, from large scale combat operations to a coin type fight that we've been in the past 2 decades. Certainly, the stabilization of the military health system is another big effort that we've been working, not only for the past year, but having the opportunity to be in and out of OTSG since 2012. We've been working hand in hand with the services, DHA and Health Affairs, on stabilizing it. And as we transitioned back in 2018, the troop facilities over to DHA, I think we pivoted hard to a readiness mission, which was probably appropriate at the time. And we realize now, we've got to pivot back, and we've got to ensure that we're maximizing getting our folks into those treatment facilities. We have a responsibility for the soldiers, beneficiaries that are in those, being seen in those treatment facilities, that they're getting the best care, and we've got capability appropriately aligned. Blast over pressure is another big one that we're putting a lot of emphasis on, ensuring that we're implementing ways of one, taking care of our soldiers, and ensuring that we know what's the best way to enable their training, but also to ensure that we're doing it in the safest manner that we can. And then the other piece is just working hand in hand on the Army staff and other senior leaders within OSD, Health Affairs, on different policy type matters.
So you mentioned, the importance of equipping the future force, training the future force. Given your background in medical logistics, numerous years serving in the operational world, and you mentioned this before, you talked about MRDC. What do you see the future of artificial intelligence, unmanned aerial ground vehicles in Army medicine, and really the joint support of the medical mission of all the Army, Navy, and Air Force?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, anywhere I get opportunity to speak on it, I talk about the importance of being able to communicate and see ourselves. And when I say see ourselves, not just the Army, we're probably never going to be in a conflict again if we're called to deploy and execute some type of operation where we're going to do that as just an Army. At a minimum, it's going to be a joint operation. And most likely it's going to be joint, and then also with our partners and allies as well. And so it's critical that we get a capability that allows us to have a common operating picture across the battlefield or the operation that we're in, so that we can see how patients are being regulated on the battlefield. Where are our key and critical assets, like our hospitalization capabilities, our evacuation. And again, I don't want to just see Army, but where are all these capabilities across the joint force and our partners and allies, and how do we communicate with them? So I think that's a key piece of it. From an AI perspective, one of the things I talk about often is that, I think there's a lot of research that's occurred and ongoing. And I think we're not far from being able to implement some of the capabilities. But I look at, I take a role 2, for example, and what we foresee could be, we could potentially see in a LISCO type operation, where we don't have the advantage of the golden hour, and we've got to hold casualties for a longer period of time, whether that's 72 hours, 96 hours. And so I look at a role 2 and a patient hold, and if I've got 3 to 4 ventilators currently, but now I'm taking on larger numbers of casualties, do I need 20, 30 ventilators, or you name the medical device? I'm not going to get 20 or 30 additional medics or techs to operate that medical device. And so how are we implementing AI so that device, I can have one tech overseeing 20, 30 devices, and that device, whether it's a ventilator or whatever it is, has the ability through AI and other means to make the adjustments automatically based on what's going on with that patient going forward. And so whether it's that type of scenario or capability, or there's a lot of space in the logistics where we should be more predictive and the type of casualties we're seeing and automatically requisitioning the types of replacement Class 8 that we need to be brought back forward to the units. That's another area, and certainly the unmanned evacuation capabilities, being looked at as well going forward. And there's a tremendous amount of lessons, both being taken out of the conflicts going on with Ukraine and Russia, and certainly what's currently going on with Israel as well. And so I think there's a lot that's learning. But as we say, while you can say 2030 and 2040, which we talk about delivering 2030 and developing 2040, those are not as far away as we think. And so there's a lot of work that we still need to do to ensure that we're putting the most advanced capability and tools into the hands of our service members, make sure they've got what they require to save as many lives on the battlefield as they can. Because I don't think we're going to have, we're not going to be as fortunate as we were in the past 2 decades to have surgical capabilities as close to every area of conflict and medevac capability to get folks within an hour. That will certainly be the standard, but we need to prepare for those times when we've got to hold large numbers of casualties for longer periods of time. And what are we doing to train and equip our folks to sustain as many of them as we can?
So you just mentioned a lot of exciting Army medicine modernization efforts. So back to those 3 key areas of focus with personnel, equipment, and training. What area of modernization within those 3 lines of effort are you most excited about? And then conversely, what are some gaps that remain that kind of keep you up at night?
Again, I think the ability to maintain a common operating picture is critical, and there's a lot of ongoing work with systems like JOMIS and OMIS-A to have that ability to connect and communicate and see where everything is on the battlefield. I think that's certainly a critical piece. I think that we've got to take a look at how does we talk a lot about being more mobile on the battlefield. My concern is that we don't try to reduce in size, especially at the Role 2, to an extent where it lacks the capability that's required because we're trying to make it more mobile. We've been taking a look at a Role 3 surgical capability, but that it's more mobile. I think most folks, especially those that have been in an employed environment, know that once you start taking on casualties, your ability to be able to be mobile is going to be very challenging. And so, what are we doing to take a look also just from a protection standpoint of those capabilities, in addition to trying to make them mobile out there? Certainly, everything in the space of wound care and what are we doing, the ongoing work to manage and produce more blood on the battlefield. And, can we get to a semi-synthetic or even a synthetic blood product in the future, is certainly ongoing work that many say certainly is possible. And I like to believe that as well. But, I think certainly blood and things like oxygen are going to be critical in a LISCO type fight. How do we reduce the size of, some of the current capabilities we have to produce oxygen on a battlefield, so we make that more mobile versus the current methods that we have to produce oxygen, which are very large and cumbersome to move around the battlefield. So I think all those things of both from a hospitalization, taking care of our wounded, and the ability to evacuation from an evacuation standpoint. We do a lot of work with the aviation community to ensure that with the new FLRAA aircraft that we're keeping up with the medical variant that's going to be part of FLRAA. It'll be critical depending on what type of COCOM we're operating in to have that capability with increased speed and extended legs that it can travel to evacuate folks. And then the part that keeps me up at night is just, it's the thing that's always, from the time I was a medical platoon leader, is have we done enough to ensure that those critical areas of making sure that from a role 1 all the way to role 3, or even a role 4. We've done enough to ensure that they've got the people, do they have the equipment, and are they trained to do what we're going to ask them to do? The last thing as a leader is, wanting to put someone in a situation that we have not prepared them in that respect. I mean, certainly, depending on what you could see in that type of environment, I'm not sure you can prepare anyone, but fully. But have you trained them, and done everything that you can? I think that's the thing that keeps me up at night, and wanting to ensure that we're not wasting any time or any effort in those areas. I talk about being a medical team leader. The thing used to be like, okay, do I have all the Class 8 I require in my medical equipment sets? Am I going to be called to deploy, and all of a sudden we open up a set and we don't even have what we need? I think that's the things that's critical to me, and trying to get that to be understood across the force of the importance of utilizing all the time you have that's focused on being ready, especially depending on what type of unit you're in, being ready when called upon to go do the mission. The worst thing would be not being trained or equipped and to do what you're asked.
So you've mentioned some excellent leadership pearls in our conversation so far. I want to focus on what would you say to that junior enlisted or junior officer who are getting a chance to lead a team, really probably the first time in their career. Is there a leadership principle that you find super important that maybe now that you wish you knew earlier, or maybe you knew it then and said, this is key for you guys learning how to be leaders of teams?
I think from a team perspective, and certainly I think it's something that as I got the opportunity to lead lead larger organizations, looking back on it, you realize it. But I think one of the most important principles that I would share with them is, empowering your team. And it goes back to that kind of that trust aspect, and building upon the team piece. I mean, we as one person single-handedly, can't do everything. And certainly you can, you've heard the phrases of, micromanagers and doesn't delegate and those type of things. I mean, certainly those fall into it, but I think it's just empowering your team, getting them to operate as a team, getting them to trust each other, and working as a team. And a lot of that comes with the empowerment of them, letting them make decisions, letting them make mistakes. I can recall as a young second lieutenant medical platoon leader, I had a platoon sergeant, and he was fantastic at letting me get out and do things and stretch the rope probably right to the edge of falling off. And then, if he saw that I was, he would pull me back. But, having your team's back and making sure that they know that as a leader, you've got them, letting them make some mistakes, and learning from them as well. So empowering the team is what I would probably share with a young leader.
So earlier we talked about how retention is a key issue in the Army as well as in military medicine. What would you share with a young military medicine service member, whether they're an officer or one of our NCOs that are trying to decide whether or not to stay in? What advice would you give them?
Well, first and foremost, I would say thank you for the fact that they have signed up and served for whatever length of time that they did. As I think I said earlier, when I first came into service, I wasn't certain at that time, being a young 20-year-old, that was this going to be what I was going to do for my adult life, I guess. Quite honestly, I think at the time, I got to that 10-year mark, and I looked around to see what else was out there to do, and I just didn't find anything that really got me as excited as what I was doing in the Army and being a part of a great team out there. And so, like I said, first and foremost, I'd say thank you. Whenever someone, I encounter someone that is making that decision to get out, having that conversation with them, those that have a plan, because there's a lot of them that get to points in their life where it's just the right decision where they're at in their life and with their family and the things that they want to do. And I certainly want to support them in whatever those endeavors are. It's the ones that more so that are a little bit undecided on what they want to do. And I try to convince them, to continue to serve a little bit longer. I don't try to influence them to say, well, now you should stay in for 20, but, staying a little bit longer until you really kind of figure out what it is that you want to do, more so than just jumping because you want to jump. And then the last thing I would highlight is that I think that the military, and, certainly for me, speaking only for the Army, is that, I grew up a small town kid, never, I can tell you that. My brother said it during my promotion to 1-star. That if someone had told him back in 1986 when I graduated from high school that I'd be where I'm at, he would have been like, I need to get you checked. But I grew up a real small town kid, and had barely traveled out of the state of Texas probably at the time. And so my point is that the amount of opportunities that the Army gives you, and not only the opportunities to see things and experience things, but the opportunities they give you to lead and to do tough, challenging missions, and the responsibilities that they place in your hands to lead, young people and into tough, challenging, complex problems. I'm not sure there's a lot of organizations out there that do the same. I'm sure there's some, but I think the Army is unique in that that you may not have to have all the different qualifications and education pieces, and they're still going to give you an opportunity to go out and do great things out there. So I think I would just remind them of the opportunities that the Army gives you to continue to serve.
So when the history books are written 50, 100 years from now, what would you want them to say was the legacy of Tony McQueen in military medicine?
So I'll try to answer it, but I'm not a big legacy person. I think first and foremost, I would want him to say he was a good teammate. And then second, and I talk to folks about this quite a bit, is that I see sometimes leaders that they want to come in and they're like, I'm in command for 2 years, or I'm in this job for 2 years or a year. And I think too often they want to try to get a list of things done in that time period. And sometimes worse, to me, the worst thing is they want to get things done that maybe it's just what they think wants to be done. My point is that I don't think it's as important about what it is that we get done, during that finite time that you're getting the opportunity to lead our sons and daughters and young Americans. I think it's really important. And what are you doing to set the conditions so that organization continues to be successful going forward? I tell people all the time, I said, to me, the mark of success is once you leave an organization, especially if you're a leader of that organization, and you look back at that organization 3 to 5 years after you've left and they're still striving and doing great things, then, you did what we asked you to do of setting that direction in a good, positive direction, and setting those conditions, whether it was making sure that they were resourced with the right amount of staff, or from a budget standpoint, or from a training standpoint. It's looking back and that organization continuing to be successful, not just what did you do in that finite piece of time and check the block that you did some things, and then you leave, and if no one's a believer in that, all of a sudden it stops occurring. It's those things that keep the organization going. But most importantly, like I said, just that I was a good teammate would be enough for me.
Well, we've been speaking with Army Deputy Surgeon General, Major General Tony McQueen on WarDocs Podcast. Sir, thanks again for sharing your experiences and insights with us, and thank you for your service to the nation. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to WarDocs. We sure hope you enjoyed it. WarDocs is a nonprofit organization supported by donations from listeners like you. Please follow and subscribe to our show on whatever platform you consume your podcasts, and rate and review this episode, and share the show with your contacts on social media. Find out more information about our show, our guests, and how to become a member of Team WarDocs on WarDocsPodcast.com. Thank you for your support. If you like war stories and medical drama, WarDocs has you covered. Spread the word.